Hello, readers, and welcome back to Quarantine Literacy. We are continuing our awesome, imaginative week where we are really turning inward and thinking about ways that we can use our brain and our emotions and our creativity to just create new worlds and new realities. So today, I thought we would read a really fun book called Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. You may have heard of this book. In fact, it has been turned into a movie. This is written by Judy Barrett and drawn by Ron Barrett. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat. And Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed toward the kitchen ceiling, and landed right on Henry. It's a pancake. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall-tale bedtime story he'd ever told. Across an ocean, over lots of huge, bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chewandswallow. In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees and gardens around them, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town of Chewandswallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The sky? They didn't need supermarkets? I want to hear more about this. The only thing that was really different about Chewandswallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Whatever the weather served, that was what they ate. But it never rained rain. It never snowed snow. It rained things like soup and juices. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas. And sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Look at those hamburgers coming in. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins. That way they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them home and put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry between meals. So look at this. Here's some football players pausing their practice to eat some what looks like pie that has fallen from the sky. And here's somebody driving, and she's catching a pancake out her car window. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters, already in their rolls, blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby, Then the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. So here they are in Ralph's roofless restaurant. And they don't even need servers, do they? Because they don't need cooks. They don't need anything because they just sit down and then they catch their food from the sky. Boy, this is a grandpa with a great imagination. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by gradual clearing, with a wonderful jello setting in the west. So instead of sun, it's jello. The sanitation department of Chewandswallow had a rather unusual job of sanitation. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the dogs and cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil would be richer for people's flower gardens. So the only thing they need to grow is flowers because they don't even need to grow food, right? Not like my garden that has cucumbers and tomatoes and squashes. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. Dun, dun, dun! That's what my daughter and I do whenever it seems like a book is starting to turn from like happy to a little bit dark. So here's a newspaper article and it says, "The Chew and Swallow Digest, spaghetti ties up town." Looks like now they're having some trouble with the weather. One day there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. And look, they've got their noses plugged because it smells really bad, that cheese. The next day there was only broccoli and it was all overcooked. Oh boy, look at them. They do not look happy about eating that soggy broccoli. And the next day there were Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Blech, that doesn't sound good. Another day there was a pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going and they could barely find the rest of the meal. They got stuck in the fog. Whew. And look, this poor kid is trying to celebrate his birthday, but all that's there is Brussels sprouts. I actually like Brussels sprouts, but still, that may not be my first choice for my birthday meal. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. Uh-oh, you guys. So at first they were all like, hey, this is great. Food falls from the sky. I never have to make a meal. I don't have to plant any food in the ground. But now it looks like things are taking a turn for the worse. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they had ever seen before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged and the sanitation department was beside itself. Oh, the mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds picked at it, but it just stayed there and got staler and staler. There was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because of its weight, so they had to close the school. Whew. Well, I would say a pancake falling on the school is an even stranger reason than to cancel school than a pandemic. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended with a stomach ache. Oh. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. What are they going to do? You guys, what's going to happen? This is cuckoo. They can't go on like this. The food's going to take over the whole town. This is getting like intense. I hope they find a solution. The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up and there was no more school for the children. Gosh, I'm definitely finding a connection to myself here where there's no school. So we have no school right now either, at least not in person. I wonder if they're doing distance learning too. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chewandswallow. It was simply a matter of survival. The people glued together the giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style, with peanut butter, and took the absolute necessities with them. And they set sail on their rafts for a new land. Look at that, you guys. The bottom of the ship is made out of bread and peanut butter. And then the sail is made out of like pepperoni pizza and slices of cheese. The flag at the top is bacon. That's pretty funny. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town, which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves out of it. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food at a supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. No one ever got hit by a hamburger again. And nobody dared to go back to Chewandswallow to find out what had happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his goodnight kiss. So, what a crazy story, huh? That Grandpa came up with. And it's interesting because these people, the townspeople of Chewandswallow, had to leave their town and they had to start over. And they had to get used to all these different kinds of things and all these different ways of behaving and existing. And that kind of reminds me of what's going on with us. Even though it's really different, we're also having to come to grips with a new way of existing. And we're having to find new ways of doing things in the world. So it's interesting that even though this is like a really silly, fun, imaginative book, we can still find connections to it. The next morning, we woke up to see snow falling outside our window. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sliding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top, and we could almost smell mashed potatoes. Well, I think that was a really fun and very imaginative book. You have to really have a big, awesome imagination to come up with all of those silly details. So I'm thinking that tonight or today, your challenge can be to write an imaginative story all of your own. Something wild and wacky and tremendously outrageous. Use all those story elements, setting, plot, right? Like problem and solution, characters, and just come up with a fun, interesting, imaginative story. Okay, my friends, I am having the best week with you because I love using my imagination. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.